Ford has got a bold new strategy to reduce EV costs. They're asking everyone for their help, and that includes their suppliers. But is it going to work, and how do you actually cut costs when building a car, let alone an EV? That's what we're going to discuss. Let's have a chat, shall we? I'm Brian. Welcome to Futuraza. So before we get into this big exciting story about Ford, I wanted to extend one more thank you for Jan from TeslaFix for allowing use of his studio this week while I'm in Germany. I'm going to be in Austria on the weekend for the X takeover of Europe. It's going to be a lot of fun. Big old Tesla takeover, lots of big Tesla names there, whole lot of footage to shoot. Thank you to my patrons, my subscribers on YouTube, my followers, my subscribers, I guess, on X. All of you guys are the reason I'm able to do this, and I thank you so much. I will get thanks to the new members when I'm back in town at my computer. So what do we got here? Well, we've got some very exciting stuff. Of course, Ford begs suppliers to help stem EV losses. We will all win, or we will all lose together. Now, Business Insider is famously, well, it's Binsider. Don't drink it. But this is not a terrible story. It's just a story. This is the sort of thing that they should be doing, is just reporting what's going on. Ford is asking suppliers for cost-cutting ideas. Ford and other major automakers still lose billions on EVs, and the auto industry is adjusting to a new wave of EV customers. So if you want to save money when you're building EVs, how do you do it? Well, first, you need an economy of scale. You need to get your volume up because that's where pricing gets good. You need a simple design, something that eliminates as many parts, processes, or procedures as possible. And there's a bunch of ways you can do that. What you really need is a platform that was designed for the purpose it's being used for. You need something. If you're talking about building an EV, don't build a car and then make it an EV. You've introduced inefficiencies. It's got a lot of stuff that you had to pay to put in that doesn't matter, that doesn't work, that doesn't add anything. Things like having a structural battery pack can reduce weight dramatically, but really what it reduces is the cost and complexity of having a second structure to the vehicle. When I see people looking at the idea of battery swapped vehicles like the Neo, and they're saying it's going to be cheaper for customers because if my battery dies, I just get a new one. Right, but batteries aren't free. Someone had to pay for that. And if you're not paying for it, that company will go broke. But let's pretend that the economics work out just fine. What you've still got is redundant structure. And really, the whole battery swap idea is terrible because imagine if Tesla went with all swaps when they started with the Model S. Well, great. Now we've got the Model X. The battery just pops right in. Then you come out with the Model 3 and the battery we made is too large. It's too wide, it's too long. It needs to be shorter and narrower. Okay, you know what? From now on, we're just using the Model 3 and Y-sized battery. Great. Oh no, now we have a Cybertruck. What are you going to do? Put a Model 3 battery in it? You could. You wouldn't get much range. So you need the form factor to work too. It's just crazy. And trying to make a Model 3 structural battery pack for a Cybertruck would probably not provide the kind of structure you're looking for, especially since it's the wrong shape and size. Well, we'll just have 3 different batteries. You just tripled the complications. Okay, so Ford is trying to get in on all those things. But what they need is, and here we go back to it again, the memo to its part suppliers asking for them to help find ways to cut the EV manufacturing cost. In the call to action memo, first reported by Crane's Detroit Business, Ford asked its suppliers to work with the company on cost-cutting measures to bring about much-needed affordability in the EV market. This request to suppliers is the latest in a series of strategy shifts. Is it going to work? Is it going to do the trick? Can suppliers really cut stuff out? Now, we know from Sandy Monroe, who runs Monroe & Associates, a benchmarking and teardown firm in Detroit. He had worked for Ford for a very long time. He still consults with Ford. He still does projects for them. And I don't know if that's been explicitly stated, but when Jim Farley came out to Monroe & Associates to present Sandy with his truck. Sandy, you purchased a truck. I wish to deliver it myself. One thing that was barely noticed was behind them was an F-150 Lightning that had already been torn apart. That's unusual. So that's evidence that they're already working with Ford. When Sandy was working with Ford, he said, as an engineer, He was lucky to get 3-4 changes a year into those cars. And this suggests that they're going to say, hey, supplier, you got a good idea? We're going to make it work. I find that claim a little dubious. If the engineers themselves can't get the changes in, how could the supplier? Ford is one of the only auto companies that's announced the results of its EV business. We should mention that real quick. While most car companies that have a gas and electric division, they don't divide them out. Ford has done this for a couple reasons. One is they don't want the drag from EVs to show up on the books as a drag for all auto. You can see the separation. And while money is shared between departments, it's still accounted for. So you can look at the company and say, the profit isn't as high as it should be, but we know where the money went. They could also be using it to say, look, EVs don't work. We shouldn't do them. Now, I'm not convinced that's what Ford is doing, but that is one approach they could be taking. So Ford has incurred some pretty heavy losses here, and they have shown them clearly. They're on track to lose another $5.5 billion this year. At the same time, the automaker's been forced to slash prices on its electric cars and slow production. So they're asking for advice. We need your best ideas, they're saying. Well, I have some best ideas for you guys. You need to increase volume. You need to simplify your design, and you need a purpose-built vehicle. The good news is they've got a Skunk Works division that's apparently been designing purpose-built EVs. That's going to save them right there a little bit. Then they need to get the volume up. That will save them a little bit. If they can get the batteries made in the US or North America so that buyers qualify for the full incentive, that will help them tremendously. It will help buyers with affordability tremendously. But they need to simplify the design. Parts suppliers are unlikely to come up with that suggestion because it means fewer parts to be purchased. A good example I saw was there was a car designed and the mirror adjustments were on the dashboard. And because all the departments were separate, they didn't realize there was a problem. They couldn't do it. You know what? Make the mirror adjustments on the door instead. Or maybe it was the seat adjustments were on the seat. We want to put them on the door instead because the way the seat hits the door frame, we can't put them there. Put the seat adjustment on the door. Simple, right? Except now you need to redo the wiring harness. You need to use different wires because these ones bend through the channel in the door, and you need to re-engineer, you need to revalidate, and then you need to redesign the wiring harness. That little change can be very expensive and difficult. That's why so many manufacturers will use the same parts over and over in every car. But then you get one oddball car where you need to make one new piece, and then you've got it on 10 cars, and then all of a sudden you've got a million parts again. That's why Tesla moved to get as many of the functions as they could off the buttons and knobs and onto the screen. The computer's controlling all of those things anyway. All those wires add cost, complexity, and introduce new margins for error, new failure. You don't want that. So what does Ford need to do? They need to do all of the above, and they need to do it soon. Ford has the luxury of having tremendous sales in other divisions, so that will save them a little bit. We need your best ideas to drive cost reduction, even if they've been previously rejected by Ford. Liz Dorr, Ford's chief supply chain officer, reportedly wrote in the memo, "We have all invested heavily in the success of the EV business, and we will all win or lose together." Dishonest. The parts suppliers make parts for multiple companies. I still have 2 parts sources. My third one, my one in Mexico, is no longer with that firm, but I have 2 part suppliers who are still friendly with me. I haven't had a chance to talk to them in quite some time, but I haven't had any need for information. To say we're all in it together, if Ford is buying blinkers from XYZ Parts, they're selling blinkers to other people too. So if Ford went down in flames, XYZ Parts would still be in business. And if Ford eliminates a bunch of parts, XYZ could go down in value or layoffs or lose out in other ways. So a Ford spokesperson told Business Insider the company remains focused on delivering affordable electric vehicles to customers and building a profitable EV business. That's what we need to hear because the future is already here. It's not happening. It has happened. If you look around the world, you could create these new protectionist policies that insulate the U.S. from the shifting tide of technology. You could absolutely do that. You could say, we're going to allow dyno burners firing off all their splody juice all day, every day, forever. We're going to be a gas country. And that's great unless Ford plans to remain a global company. If they wish to sell products in China, they need to electrify. If they wish to sell products in Europe after 2035, they need to electrify. And not just in a token effort, in a serious, all-in, do-or-die kind of way, because half measures in these regards will not yield results. What you'll get is a terrible product. This week, I've been sharpening up on my German, and I can tell you that within days I was up to 40% comprehension. Pretty good, right? 40% comprehension still leaves you with no idea what's actually being said. I would like to see Ford have more than 40% competence in EVs, and they will get there. They've got a few things going right for them. I would point out as well, the article goes on to say the EV market is changing. Ford and other major automakers, including Tesla, are struggling to meet the demands of the new crop of electric vehicles customers who have come to dominate the segment. These shoppers tend to be more practical, frugal, and more likely to consider all options when deciding between an electric, hybrid, or gas-powered vehicle, sort of. The commercials I've been seeing have been touting hybrids, and instead of talking about miles per gallon, now they talk about range, because it sounds exciting when you've got a Toyota or a Honda or a Ford with 500, 600 miles of range when 400 of that is gas. It's not as exciting. In these matchups, hybrids have been winning lately. Part of it is the perverse incentive in the IRA that allows hybrids to claim vast credits despite having tiny batteries. It makes things a little goofy. So what did I miss? What did I misunderstand? Leave it all in the comments below. And my friends, I beg you to like, subscribe, do all those usual things. But most of all, you must stay tuned, stay juicy, and I cannot wait to hear from you clever robots, perhaps in Michigan, where I'll be at the takeover there, the big Michigan Owners Club event on June 15th and 16th, or at my birthday party in Longview, Washington on July 3rd. Yes, you are invited. Stay tuned for details. I hope to see you there.